Gabriella Vance had no idea what kind of chaos agreeing to be a bridesmaid would bring into her life until she walked into that tuxedo-filled rehearsal dinner and locked eyes with the best man. The ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and soft jazz. Gabriella tugged at the neckline of her blush satin dress, adjusting it while her cousin Brooke squealed beside her about her wedding playlist. She'd flown in from Chicago just 2 days ago after Brooke had begged her to be a last-minute replacement bridesmaid. Gabriella had said yes, thinking it would be a quiet weekend of champagne toasts and awkward small talk with strangers. What she hadn't expected was him. He stood near the bar, tall and broad-shouldered, his black suit impeccably tailored, his tie loosened just enough to hint at a long day. His dark hair was swept back, jaw clean-shaven, and eyes, God, those eyes locked onto hers across the room like they knew her. "Who's that?" Gabriella whispered to Brooke. Brooke followed her gaze and giggled. "That's Kieran Cross, best man, and no, he's not married or dating, but he's very..." Unavailable, Gabriella blinked. "He's a CEO, like a real one. Built his own tech company, sold it, bought another. He's one of those scary rich people who act like they're normal." Brooke shrugged. "But he's nice, quiet, intense. Just don't fall for him." "I'm not here to fall for anyone," Gabriella muttered, but Kieran Cross was already walking toward her. "Gabriella, right?" His voice was low, smooth, and confident. "We're standing together at the altar tomorrow. Figured I should introduce myself before we're fake married for 60 seconds. She blinked up at him. "Right, bridesmaid, best man, got it." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but enough to make her heart skip. The rest of the evening blurred into small talk and laughter. Kieran stayed close, asking questions, not surface-level ones, but real ones. About her art, her job as a gallery assistant, why she hated elevators. He listened like he was collecting pieces of her. Every time she thought the conversation would end, he asked something else. Later, as the bridal party moved to the rooftop suite for pre-wedding drinks, Gabriella found herself standing beside him again. "You always this charming at weddings?" she asked, leaning on the balcony rail. "I've been in exactly 2, he replied. "But this is the first time I've been distracted by the bridesmaid instead of the speeches." She laughed, then froze. "You're serious?" His eyes didn't leave hers. "Completely." Gabriella looked away, suddenly self-conscious. She didn't do flings. And definitely not with men who probably owned penthouses and private jets and had assistants for their assistants. "I'm not the kind of girl who gets distracted by CEOs," she said. "Good," he said simply. "I'm not the kind of CEO who wants to be treated like one." That night, she couldn't sleep. The next morning, chaos filled the bridal suite, curling irons, coffee cups, laughter. Gabriella kept her focus on her cousin, helping zip dresses and pin veils. But every time she caught a glimpse of a tall figure moving toward the ceremony space, her stomach flipped. The ceremony was set in a glass atrium wrapped in white roses. Gabriella took her place near the altar, bouquet shaking slightly in her hand. Then Kieran stepped beside her and everything else faded. "You clean up nice," he whispered, eyes scanning her. "You're not supposed to flirt during a wedding," she whispered back, trying not to smile. "I'm not good at following rules." When the vows ended and Brooke and her groom kissed, the ballroom erupted in applause. Kieran leaned closer, pretending to adjust her arm. "Dinner later." "With me?" She turned to him, startled. "Like a date?" He didn't blink. "Exactly like that." Gabriella hesitated. This wasn't her world. He was probably used to women in designer gowns and boardroom battles, not someone who lived with a roommate and bought wine based on price tags. But the way he looked at her made her feel like she belonged exactly where she was. "All right," she said, voice steady. "But only if there's pasta," he grinned. "The best in the city." The dinner was at her restaurant she'd never even heard of, no signage, just a private elevator, soft piano music, and a table already set for 2 with a view of the skyline. "You really don't do normal dinners, do you?" she asked, sitting down. "I don't do normal anything," he said casually, pouring her wine. "Why would I?" The food was incredible, the conversation even better. They talked for hours about her art school dreams, about his early failures, about what it meant to want something real in a world full of fake. At one point, Gabriella looked around the candlelit room and laughed. "This doesn't feel real," he leaned forward. "It is, I promise it is." When he drove her back, yes, in a sleek black car with hidden handles and custom leather, he walked her to the door of her hotel suite and paused. "I want to see you again," he said, voice quiet. "I live in Chicago," she reminded him. "I have offices there." "That's not fair." "I'm not playing fair, I'm playing for keeps." She stared up at him, her heart racing. "I'm not ready for whatever this is," she said honestly. "I just met you." "I know," he said, "but I've never met anyone like you." He didn't kiss her, just brushed her hand with his, lingering. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She'd come here to support her cousin. She didn't expect to meet a man who looked at her like she was more than just someone passing through. She didn't expect the best man to be a CEO, and she definitely didn't expect him to fall for her, but something told her. This was only the beginning. The Monday after the wedding, Gabriella walked into the gallery with her coat still half-buttoned and her hair damp from the morning rain, pretending her world hadn't just tilted on its axis. She hadn't told anyone about the dinner, or the car, or the way he'd looked at her like he was trying to memorize her. She'd returned to Chicago telling herself it had been a weekend thing, a surreal, impossibly gorgeous evening that didn't need to mean more than it did. But then he showed up. She was adjusting the lighting on a new abstract installation when she heard the soft chime of the front door. She turned, expecting a delivery or maybe one of the neighborhood artists. Instead, she saw him, Kieran Cross, standing in a space filled with acrylic and canvas like he belonged there. "You're not lost, are you?" she asked, heart thudding. "No," he said, eyes scanning the room, "but I think I might be out of place." She stepped down from the ladder, her voice careful. "You flew here, my plane landed an hour ago," he said simply. "I had meetings tomorrow, figured I'd come early. And you just showed up." "You said you weren't ready," he said, watching her closely. "I respected that, but I don't like waiting around when I already know what I want." She folded her arms, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. "This isn't a boardroom pitch." "No," he said. "It's more important than that." The gallery owner, Deanna, passed through the front hall, raising a brow before disappearing into her office. Gabriella cleared her throat. "I'm working." "I'll wait outside," he said, moving toward the door without hesitation. "Take your time." She watched him step out into the rainy afternoon, then exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the moment he walked in. By the time her shift ended, he was still there, leaning against a sleek black car parked across the street, a navy wool coat over his shoulders. She crossed to him slowly, unsure of what she was walking into. "You don't have to prove anything," she said before he could speak. "I'm not trying to prove something," he said. "I'm trying to give you the space to say yes." "To what?" He opened the car door. "Dinner again, but this time on your terms." She hesitated, then slid in. They ended up at a cafe tucked between two bookstores in Lincoln Park, with mismatched chairs and candles in teacups. He didn't flinch at the creaky floors or the chipped menus. Instead, he listened while she told him about the gallery's new exhibit, about the artist who sculpted entirely with broken glass, about how she sometimes dreamed of opening her own space. "Why haven't you?" he asked. "Because dreams don't pay rent," she said, shrugging. "Neither do regrets." She looked at him then. Not at his tailored coat or the watch on his wrist or the way the waiter had practically bowed when he recognized him. She looked at the man who, for reasons she still didn't understand, had flown across the country just to sit across from her in a lopsided chair. "You don't know me," she said quietly. "I know enough to want to," he replied. After they left the cafe, he walked her back to her apartment building. She paused outside the door, her keys in hand, the streetlight casting a soft glow over the sidewalk. "I'm not used to this," she said. "The grand gestures, the sudden appearances." "I don't do them often," he said. "Only when it matters." She didn't invite him up, he didn't ask. But before she turned to go, he reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. "What is it?" she asked. "Just open it later." "When you're alone." She watched him walk away, the rain starting to fall again, and didn't open the envelope until she was inside, coat still on, boots dripping on the mat. Inside was a single ticket. an invitation to an art benefit hosted at one of the city's most exclusive private foundations. Her name was printed in gold. She stared at it, stunned. There was no note, no explanation, just her name and a time and a place she'd never have had access to. The next evening, she wore the only black dress she owned. As she stepped into the entry hall of the foundation, she felt wildly out of place surrounded by shimmering gowns, tuxedos, and champagne flutes held with practiced ease. Then she saw him. Kieran stood near a sculpture made of curved steel and light, his posture relaxed, one hand in his pocket. He looked up as if he'd been waiting for her since the doors opened. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as she approached. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "Then I remembered what you said about not waiting around." He tilted his head slightly. And she glanced around at the glittering room, then back at him. "And I figured I might regret not coming more than I'd regret being overdressed." "You're not overdressed," he said. "You're perfect." As the evening unfolded, she realized the event wasn't just about art. It was a fundraiser for underfunded creative programs, something he'd helped organize, something no one in the press had written about. "You're not who I expected," she said as they stood by a panoramic window overlooking the skyline. "Good," he said. "I'd hate to be predictable." Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the music softened, he leaned in close. "I'm not asking for everything," he said. "Just the chance to keep learning who you are." She didn't respond right away, but she didn't walk away either. Rain streaked the windows of Gabriella's apartment as she stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at her phone like it might answer the questions she refused to say out loud. 3 days had passed since the foundation gala. 3 days without hearing from Kieran. And despite every rational part of her insisting she should be relieved, she could feel the silence like a bruise. She hadn't expected constant contact. But anything would have made her feel less like she'd stepped into a dream only to wake up alone. She didn't know how to reach him, not directly. He hadn't given her a number, hadn't asked for hers. Everything between them had been so immediate in person. Real, and now quiet. She tried to focus on her sketch's preliminary concepts for a gallery event. Deanna had tentatively agreed to let her curate, but the pencil stayed still in her hand. Her thoughts kept circling back to the way he'd looked at her that night. Intent. Steady. Like he was already planning where she fit in his world. So where was he now? The answer came in the form of a knock. She opened the door to find a man in a tailored charcoal suit holding a slim white envelope. He gave her a polite nod, handed it to her without a word, and turned away before she could ask anything. Inside was a single black card with embossed lettering. An invitation. No details beyond a time, a street address, and a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. Trust the moment. Gabriella arrived at the address precisely at 7. It wasn't a restaurant or a gallery. It was a quiet brownstone tucked behind a row of iron trees and ivy-covered gates in Old Town. The door opened before she could knock. A woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Right this way." Gabriella followed her through a long, candlelit hallway and into a room filled with soft jazz, low lights, and a single table set for 2. Kieran stood by the window, his jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows, nursing a glass of something amber. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, turning to face her. "I wasn't sure you'd ask," she replied. He gestured to the table. "I wanted to do this without photographers, without menus. Just us." She sat, unsure what to say. Her heart beat faster than it should have, and she hated that she couldn't read him the way he seemed to read her. "I've been thinking about you," he said, pouring water into her glass. "About how easily you saw through everything people usually get stuck on." "You mean the suits and the headlines?" she asked. "No," he met her eyes. "I mean the armor," she swallowed. "That's not something people usually admit." "I don't usually need to," he said. "But I don't want to pretend with you." They ate slowly crab risotto, roasted carrots, wine she couldn't pronounce. The food was good, but it was the silence between their words that felt the most intimate. "I disappeared for a reason," he said after a pause. "Not because I changed my mind. Because I needed to deal with something before I could see you again." "Is everything all right?" she asked. "It is now. But I had to make some decisions about the company step back from something I thought I wanted. Turns out it wasn't what I needed. She leaned forward slightly. And what do you need? He didn't hesitate. Clarity, and you give me that. Gabriella's breath caught. What does that even mean? You make me feel like I'm not performing, he said. Like I can breathe. She looked down at her hands, unsure how to carry the weight of that honesty. That's a lot to put on someone you barely know, he nodded. It is, but I don't want to waste time pretending I don't feel it. She didn't know what to say to that, so she stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the skyline she'd grown up with but never really noticed until now. I'm scared, she said finally, I know. I don't know what this would even look like. Neither do I, he said, but I'll figure it out if you're willing. She turned to face him. I still have rent to pay, I still work weekends. I don't have a driver or a trust fund or a board of advisors. He walked toward her slowly. I don't need you to have any of those things. I just need you to be honest with me. What if I don't trust myself with this? I'll wait until you do. Gabriella felt something shift inside her, not the dizzying rush she'd felt at the wedding, not the flutter of connection at the gallery, but something deeper, quieter. A kind of understanding. I don't want to be swept off my feet, she said. I want to stay grounded. He reached for her hand. Then I'll stand still with you. She let him hold it. That night he didn't try to kiss her. He walked her to the car waiting outside, held the door open, and promised only one thing. You'll never have to guess how I feel, she nodded, stepping inside. As the car pulled away, she glanced back and saw him still standing on the steps, hands in his pockets, watching her like he wasn't letting go. And for the first time, she didn't want to run from whatever this was. She wanted to see where it went. Snow had started to fall by the time Gabriella stepped out of the gallery that evening, a soft dusting that turned the city into something hushed and glowing. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she didn't rush. For once, she didn't feel like she was racing toward or away from anything. She was walking toward something that felt real. Inside the gallery, Deanna had handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope before she left. Deliver it in person, she'd said, eyes glinting with something more than curiosity. Gabriella hadn't opened it yet. The address written on the outside was in Gold Coast, a part of the city she rarely ventured into. She recognized the street name, though Kieran's company headquarters. The building was a fortress of glass and steel, sleek and cold from the outside, but she knew better now. She knew what was inside wasn't cold at all. The lobby was quiet when she arrived. A receptionist looked up and, upon seeing the envelope, immediately picked up a phone and murmured something. Less than a minute later, an assistant in a dark blazer appeared. He's in a meeting, the woman said softly, but he asked that you wait upstairs. Gabriella followed her into a private elevator, the kind without buttons. It simply knew where to go. The doors opened onto a penthouse office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. City lights stretched out in every direction, and the room was filled with warmth books, an antique globe, and a piano tucked into the corner. The assistant disappeared without a word. She wandered slowly toward the shelves, noting the mix of titles: economic theory next to poetry, architecture beside biographies. She hadn't expected anything about this room to feel personal, but it did. It felt like him. A door clicked open behind her. You came, Kieran said, his voice lower than usual. I wasn't sure if you'd be free. I'm never free, he said, pulling off his jacket and tossing it onto the back of a leather chair, but I make time for what matters. She set the envelope on the desk. Deanna wanted you to have this. He didn't reach for it. Instead, his gaze stayed fixed on her. Are you all right? She hesitated. I think so. Everything feels different lately. He stepped closer. Because of this? Yes and no. Because of what it's making me ask myself. Like what? Like what I actually want for my life, and why I've been afraid to admit it. He rested his hands on the edge of the desk, not touching her. You don't need permission to want more. I've spent so long being practical, she said. Keeping things small, manageable, but now I keep thinking, what if I stopped doing that? I've been waiting for you to say that, he said, voice quiet. Why? Because I already made a decision, one I wasn't going to bring up until you were ready, she frowned. What decision? He walked to a side cabinet and pulled out a folder, opened it, turned it toward her. Her name was printed at the top of the first page. Her heart stopped. "I bought the building next to your gallery," he said. "It's being renovated. It'll be ready in 3 months." "What does that have to do with me?" "I want you to run it, curate it, build it the way you've always dreamed, full creative control, no restrictions." Her breath caught. "You can't just—" "I'm not giving you anything," he corrected. "I'm investing in you." "There's a difference." She stared at the papers. "I didn't ask for this." "No, you didn't, but you inspired it, and I can't ignore that." She sank into the chair behind her, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is insane." "It's not charity," he said. "It's belief. I don't know if I can do it." "You already are." She looked up at him, eyes burning. "Why are you doing this?" "Because every time I talk to you, I see the person I want beside me, not just for dinners or events, for real life, the hard parts. The quiet parts." She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, glinting silver, curved into a pendant shaped like a constellation. He placed it gently in her palm. "The night I met you, you talked about how you hated elevators because they made you feel trapped, but you never said what made you feel free." She looked down at the necklace, then back at him. "This," she whispered. "This is what free feels like." He stepped closer. "Then let's build something on it, not because it's easy, because it's worth it." She stood, her hands trembling. "I want to say yes," she said, "to all of it, but only if you promise something, anything. Don't disappear again, even if it's messy. Even if I get scared." He touched her cheek gently. "I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." She leaned into him, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't uncertain, it was an answer. Weeks later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony was quiet. No press, no speeches. Just Gabriella standing beneath a new sign etched in gold, Vance Cross Gallery. Her name beside his. Not because he gave it to her, but because she'd earned it. He stood beside her, his hand in hers, as guests filtered in. Brooke arrived late, grinning as she took in the space. "So this is what happens when you're a bridesmaid for a weekend," Gabriella laughed. "Apparently. You look happy." She glanced at Kieran, who was already deep in conversation with a young artist. "I am." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, he walked her through the gallery, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. "You changed everything," he said. "No," she whispered. "You just helped me see what was already there." He turned to her then, eyes full of something steady and bright. "Marry me," she blinked. "What? Not now, not tomorrow, but someday when you're ready." She didn't hesitate. "I will." And in the quiet that followed, wrapped in art and light and everything they'd created together, she knew it had all started with a single, unexpected yes. The gallery's second exhibition opened on a rare, warm evening in April, and for the first time in her life, Gabriella Vance didn't feel like she was looking up at the world from the outside. She was in it, her name on the invitations, her vision on the walls, her hand wrapped securely in Kieran Cross's. The night held a quiet energy, distinct from the first opening. This time, the artists were younger, more experimental, the kind of talent that rarely got a platform in spaces like this. She watched as guests wandered past the installations, some confused, some inspired, all engaged. That had been the goal. Kieran stood beside her, his expression unreadable as he studied a sculpture of melted plastic twisted around shards of mirror. "You don't love it," she said. "I don't understand it," he admitted, "but I love that you do." She turned toward him. "You don't have to like everything I choose." "I don't," he said, "but I trust it, that's the difference." A soft voice interrupted them. "Gabriella," she turned and blinked. Her father stood in the entryway, tie slightly askew, holding a program in one hand. She hadn't seen him in almost a year since the last holiday dinner where she'd tried to explain why she wasn't going to law school after all. "Dad, I saw the article in the Tribune," he said, stepping forward. "Didn't know you were making headlines now." She glanced at Kieran, then back. "I didn't know you still read the arts section." "I don't. Your aunt clipped it for me." Silence hovered for a beat. Then he looked around the gallery, his eyes catching on one of the paintings. "That one's yours, isn't it?" Gabriella nodded. "It's better than I expected," he said. Kieran shifted beside her, but she tightened her grip on his hand. "Thanks, I think," her father cleared his throat. I wanted to say I'm proud of you. Even if I don't understand how all this happened. It happened because someone gave me a chance, she said. He tilted his head toward Kieran. So this is the someone. I'm not just the someone, Kieran said, voice even. I'm staying. Her father looked him over, then nodded once. Then I guess we'll be seeing more of each other. After he walked off toward the refreshments, Gabriella let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You didn't have to say that, she said quietly. I'm not interested in pretending I'm temporary, Kieran replied. Not with you. The next morning, they sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and press clippings spread across the rug. Kieran had fallen asleep halfway through reading a particularly dense review, his head tilted back against the couch, his arm looped around her waist. She studied him for a moment, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the faint crease on his brow even in sleep. It struck her all over again how improbable this had been, how a wedding weekend had become the start of a life she never dared imagine. When he stirred, she brushed her fingers through his hair. You know you can stop trying to impress me now, she said softly. He opened one eye. I haven't even started. You bought me a gallery. I invested in your gallery, he corrected, sitting up. And I'd do it again. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain. I have a question, he said when they pulled apart. Is it about my father's weird compliment last night? No. He reached into the inside pocket of his shirt and pulled out a slim black box. It's about this, she blinked. You carry that around casually now? I've been carrying it for weeks. I was waiting for the right moment. Her stomach flipped. I know we said someday, but I don't want to keep waiting. I know exactly what I want. You, every day, every night, every gallery opening. Every bad review and every brilliant success, I want all of it with you. She opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen, an emerald-cut stone, set on a band that shimmered with tiny stars. Not flashy, not traditional, just hers. You really don't do normal, she whispered. Never liked the word, he said. Will you marry me, Gabriella? She didn't hesitate. Yes. They married that summer in the garden behind the gallery beneath a canopy of string lights and ivy. No press, no sponsors. Just friends, family, artists, and a string quartet playing a melody Gabriella had composed herself. Brooke cried through the entire ceremony. Deanna gave a toast that made even Kieran laugh out loud. Gabriella's father walked her down the aisle, whispering, You were always going to do something extraordinary. She wore a dress with pockets. Kieran wore a tie she painted herself in streaks of indigo and gold. After the vows, after the kiss, after the cheers, they slipped away quietly to the rooftop above the new gallery, where a table for two waited with champagne, strawberries, and a view of the city they'd both built a future in. Kieran took her hand and kissed her palm, then her wrist, then the place below her ear that always made her breath catch. I love you, he said. I know, she whispered. But say it again anyway. I love you, he repeated. And I always will. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of the city and the softness of falling dusk, Gabriella believed it with every part of her, not because of the ring, not because of the gallery. But because this life, this love, this completely unexpected forever had been built not on fairy tales, but on something better, truth. Trust. And the kind of love that never needed to be chased, only chosen. They chose each other, and they never looked back.